let's skip ahead a little bit to the project, if you will, that put us on a collision course, put you on my radar and a lot of people's radar, which was Bitch Slap.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing first of all, I think my first exposure to it was when you guys showed up at Comic-Con. I think it was my first exposure to it. And then when I started spreading the word about it, like I started hearing from everybody who saw these posters, like, this is brilliant. This is like such a great old style ploitation kind of movie. Mm-hmm. This looks amazing with great action. Of course, you had Lucy Lawless. So let's start there. How did the whole Bitch Slap thing for you begin? When was the first you heard about it?
So that agent that I got when I did that episode of Charmed.
Who hired you once you already got a job?
Who hired me once I already got a job. Mm-hmm. He was not a great agent. He was an agent, but he was not a great agent. And he sent me a script, or not even a script. He sent me an audition for a movie called Bitch Slap. And I thought, well, here it is. This is my rock bottom. I'm basically I'm auditioning for softcore porn at this point, which I hadn't read anything about it, but I read the monologue that Hell has, which,
Name of your character.
Yes, the name of my character, Hell. If you see the movie, it's when she has to spin this tale when Deputy Fuchs comes and is like, ladies, what are you doing out here in the middle of the desert? And I can't say, well, we're looking for $200 million in diamonds that's been buried by an underworld kingpin. I can't say that. So I have to do this whole tale. And I thought that the writing was so brilliant because I got it. I got the joke instantly. I went, oh, this is fucking funny. I like this. I'm into that. And so I knew, okay, I really think that this could be something special. So I did the audition, and then John Barba, may he rest in peace, and Lisa Fields, the casting directors, they brought me back in for the producers, Brian Peck and Eric Rendeman, and the director, Rick Jacobson. And as they were walking in, I saw Brian Peck kind of give me a look, and I just knew. I knew that I had the part. The second he gave me that look, it was kind of that look of like, oh, there's our Hell. So I went in there, and I'm sitting there, and Eric said, so we just want to talk to you about the script. What did you think? And I said, well, I didn't get the script. And I see Johnny Barba behind the camera go, like his eyes just bugged out. And they said, well, the only reason why you're here is because we wanted to talk to you about the script, because they wanted to make sure that I understood, oh, okay, there's a naked fight scene in prison. There's a water fight scene. And it's not naked. It's just implied nudity. And they wanted to make sure that I was okay with the lesbianism and the kissing and so I didn't know about any of that. And so then, as it turns out, Johnny Barba had sent the script to my agent, who just forgot to send it to me. And so then he called and said, okay, well, they want to meet you again, but they want you to read the script first. And at this point now, they called me to Brian Peck's house. And I walked in the door and I sat down. And at this point, I've about had enough of the Hollywood nonsense. And I sat down and I said, I'm just letting you know, I have given my agent the address here, and I'm supposed to call him 10 minutes from now. If I don't call him, he's sending the police to this address. And they were like, she's hired. That was pretty much all they needed to know. And so we started filming. We did 2 weeks on green screen, and then we did 4 weeks in the desert in Lancaster. And I have to say, we didn't have a big budget, and nobody was getting rich off of this movie at that point. And it was really hard. It was either freezing cold or it was blistering hot. And I was in fishnet pantyhose and a pencil skirt and 3.5-inch heels running through the desert, which if you've ever run in sand, it's hard enough with sneakers or barefoot. When you're in fishnet pantyhose and 3.5-inch heels, it is almost impossible to do. And then we're doing these fight scenes, and you learn to really love the taste of sand because craft services would set up, and I don't know if we just didn't have money for sides of a tent, but there wasn't even a tent, and all the sand would blow on the food. So we'd have macaroni and cheese and sand, salad and sand, Salisbury steak and sand. And that was you just deal with it. during the water fight scene, it was too hard to keep the water heated the whole time. So as we're chugging, buckets of water on each other, which, by the way, we had crew people filling buckets of water up and then running them over and placing them just outside of the shot. And then as we were throwing buckets on each other, we'd have to run over and grab another bucket and keep chugging. And then the whole time we're having to go, and meanwhile, we'd run off the screen and be like, this motherfucking water! And it was awful. I mean, at the end of that day, we were so exhausted and so just ready to be done with it. But they were so wonderful to work with. I mean, we loved working on Bitch Slap because it really was a family. We actually just had our 10-year Bitch Slap family reunion.
I saw you post about that on social media.
It was so wonderful. I mean, Kevin Warren, our still photographer, Joe McFadden, our editor. We had our UPN, our makeup artist. We had all the department heads and as many of the cast that was in town that could come. And then they had taken all of our costumes. So they, had all of our costumes on a rack. We could take all of our costumes if we wanted. And it's just, Zoe Bell was there, who I stayed very close friends with. It's just such a unique experience because you do so many movies and so many projects and you're like, oh, I'm going to stay best friends forever. You never do. Or maybe you have one or two people out of that project that you really connect with. But to have over the years so many people from one project that get back together. America Olivo introduced me to my husband.
I didn't know that.
Yes, that's how I met my husband.
She moved to New York.
She's in New York. She's still in New York. Yeah, she bought a beautiful home upstate, and she's married to Christian Campbell, who's also an actor and wonderful. So Tom, my husband, was friends with Christian, and I was friends with America, and they introduced us, and it's really just such a beautiful movie that. It's so crazy and it's so fun to watch, but it's also the experiences that we had together. In addition to it being a really fun experience as a film and being a tongue planted firmly in cheek script that you either get it or you don't. People have said it's the best movie they've ever seen and it's the worst movie they've ever seen. I remember when we went to Cannes for the market, and we were sort of like the wild card of this. I'm forgetting the name of the sales company. They're really a big deal, but I forgot. It's a long time ago.
It is funny picturing Bitch Slap and Cannes.
Yeah, it was just, we went there and we had like this big premiere and this big party, and I'm wearing like head to toe Jean-Paul Gaultier straight from the runway. It was just crazy, this experience that we're having, because it wasn't like this was a big blockbuster, $100,000 movie. It was just we called it the little movie that could. And we were and even people who had minor roles in the film said, hey, you're going to Cannes? I'll go too. So it was like almost the entire cast was in France together, hanging out, partying, going to yacht party. We had the best time. And then the movie sold to like every territory in the world. My cousin was living in Abu Dhabi, and she emailed me and said, I just saw Bitch Slap in Abu Dhabi. I was like, what? She goes, yeah, they had to do some pretty heavy editing. I said, I have no idea what made it in there. Like the opening credits, I don't think would have even made it in there, but somehow they saw it in Abu Dhabi. But our Scandinavian distributors, they were so gung-ho that they flew the three of us over to Scandinavia. We did a Scandinavian press tour. We went to Stockholm. We went to Copenhagen and Helsinki, and it was Oslo. It was just an incredible gift that just kept giving and giving and giving. I still receive residual checks from it. Then Rick Jacobson, of course, and I went and did Spartacus together. Bitch Slap really was and continues to be this shining spot of my career. It is one of those credits that I never forget about. In fact, I actually have the movie theater standee in my house.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
My first exposure, because you were, while you were still relatively new, you were a seasoned veteran compared to, say, a Julia Voth at the
It was
time.
like her 6th audition.
Yeah.
She had just moved to Los Angeles.
So I remember my first exposure to what this movie was about, because you guys had come, you'd invaded the panel and stuff like that. And I remember standing out in the hallway outside of the panel room.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, so like, what's the movie about? And the very first thing Julia said to me, which, I mean, you could tell this is her first experience trying to promote something too. She goes, well, first of all, me and Erin, we have the hottest lesbian scene you will ever see that doesn't have nudity. And that was the very first byline of bitch slap that was ever presented to me.
I do have a story about that lesbian scene, by the way.
Tell me.
Okay, so we're in the trailer, because the lesbians, it's between me and Julia.
And by the way, I don't even know how you guys shot that, because that trailer, the confined space,
it's literally one of those tiny little, it was before the big behemoth trailers, and it was supposed to be a rickety old crappy trailer, and it was. And so we had Rick and I think 1 or 2 camera operators in there, just like a focus puller. And so, I think that I'm supposed to slam Julia against the refrigerator and start kissing her, and then she's supposed to, put me on the counters. I don't remember. But so we're shooting it, and Rick's like, okay, all right, let's just take 5 and do some stuff with the camera. So he walks out and leaves me and Julia sitting in the trailer, and it's hot, and I can tell that we're both a little bit like, okay. And I said, so, are you okay? Are you comfortable? Yeah. I'm fine. Oh, are you comfortable? Yeah, I'm good. And I said, the only thing that would really suck about this is if we go through this whole thing and then people watch it and then they just watch our sex scene and they go, wasn't that sexy? And all of a sudden, Julia, it was like someone cranked her from behind, and she just went, and she looked at me, and I felt like I was a hot dog at a baseball game. I was like, this girl is about to eat me alive. And that's all she needed to know, because I didn't even have to act. I just had to react off of her. Next thing, Rick was like, what happened? Because when we did another take, she went after me, and I was like, oh, we're doing this. Okay, so it was pretty full on at that point. I remember that feeling of we're either going to do this or why are we doing this? And I feel that way about sex scenes. I feel like if you're going to do it, you read the script, you knew what was in the script, commit to it, or just don't do it at all. And if you're going to commit to it, make it something that people really want to watch. And I feel like we did that. And then at one point we were between takes and I was laying there and Julie was sort of propped up on top of me. And I had my leg wrapped around her back. And then I just took my heel and I stretched my leg up like this right by my head. And Rick happened to look over his shoulder and he goes, oh my God, you can do that? And I said, oh yeah, I was a dancer. And he goes, okay, we're putting that in. So, and next thing you know, we were watching the scene and then my leg just goes, so yeah.
Okay.
Carry on.
So this is my first. Now this is a great segue, actually,
okay.
to move on to another major thing I really want to touch on here. So let me take the anniversary, which was my project, just as a segue.
That was right after Bitch Slap.
It was right after Bitch Slap because you, me, Julia. I had emailed with America a little bit. I think she was just in the process of moving to New York, or she was going to do a Spider-Man show, Broadway show. She was the main. She was not. She was the arachnid person. She was the spider character. She's the only person in the cast of Spider-Man: Turn Off the Dark that did not go to the hospital. Right. So I remember following all that, but. You and me and Julia kind of stayed in touch a bit. Mm-hmm. So I was putting together this little project of mine, and I remember I wrote this one character for it, and I just had Erin Cummings in, and I just used you as the template in my head when I wrote this one character, right? And I remember, so finally, and I went through all this casting process with everybody, and I hate, to this day, I hate casting. Oh, I hate doing casting. Yeah. But I interviewed and auditioned, we auditioned 60, 70 people just for your role. Oh. And I remember I called you 2 nights later, and I got you on the phone, and I said, look, Erin, I got a favor to ask. And I said, I've been interviewing all these people, auditioning all these people, but none of them are you. And to be honest, I wrote it with you in mind, would you consider this? And I remember what you said to me. You know, well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know if I would normally say something along the lines. I don't know if I normally say I'm about 4 glasses of wine into tonight. So why don't you email me over the script and let me read the script? He said, I'm about 4 glasses of wine in,
Shocker.
so send me the script.
Wait, so was I saying I normally would not say yes, or was I saying I normally would say yes?
No, I think you were saying, like, I normally wouldn't just say yes to doing any part that somebody calls me and asks me, but I'm 4 glasses of wine in, send me the script. And so I sent you the script, and here's our segue into Spartacus.
Okay.
I sent you the script, and I think in the script there was like one scene where your character there was a sex scene involved. There was a comedy bit, and there was a little bit of nudity involved. And you said you called me after reading the script, and I would have done anything to have you in it.
Oh, thank
so
you.
you called me back and you said, okay, one thing though, the one thing I don't do. I mean, if you saw a bitch slap, you know, the one thing I don't do is nudity. And I'm like, oh, I don't give a fuck. That's fine. So you came in, you worked with Manolis. I love the two of you guys together. Now, how that is a segue into Spartacus.
Because I did a lot of nudity.
It's shortly after that, it's like I remember a whole bunch of because a lot of my friends were the crew on the anniversary, and we watched the premiere of Spartacus. And it's like, well, Erin does nudity now, but it's like, but you know what? It was for Spartacus. And I want to say this up front because I say this on my show all the time. I remember watching the first 2 episodes of Spartacus, and I thought it was some of the worst television I'd ever seen in my life. And we just said, you know what, but I'm just going to keep watching it because Erin's in it. So we're just going to keep watching it. Spartacus is now in my top 3 all-time favorite television shows. There's Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, Sons of Anarchy, and Spartacus. Those are my 3 all-time favorite shows.
Thank you. I'm glad you stuck with it.
I'm really glad I stuck with it too. And I only did because you were in it, because I wanted to see you doing your thing. And the show is so great. And it is, like my viewers know, I talk about Spartacus all the time, like one of my all-time favorite shows. And so tell us a little bit about just the origins, the genesis of how you got connected in. Obviously, you had your director from Bitchslap, but walk us through that about how you got connected into Spartacus.
Well, that is another example of how it's never one thing. Like there's never one person, there's never one anything like that. So right after Bitchslap, Dollhouse, you mentioned earlier.
Right.
And I got an audition for attendant number 1 on Dollhouse. And it was for the first episode. I think that they were like shooting some additional scenes for the pilot because it had gotten picked up at this point. We knew it was going to air. And I knew that Joss Whedon was a big deal. So I was like, hey, man, I just want to be a part of anything Joss Whedon's going to do. So I'll audition for attendant number 1. No big deal. And who knows, maybe if they need the attendant to show up again in another episode, they'll get to call me. Or they'll call me. So I go and I play attendant number 1. And then I came back for a subsequent episode. And the second episode that I did, playing attendant number 1 again, was directed by Stephen DeKnight. And
really?
Yes.
Okay.
And so it was this crazy scenario where the scene that I was doing, we had like 30 minutes to shoot the whole thing. And nobody else, no one in the main cast was in that scene. I was the attendant and I was having to put all the dolls to bed, but it was a bunch of dolls that were not the main characters. It was a bunch of, background actors who were dolls and they just had to lay down and then I had to like look around and then press a button and all their beds closed. So it was a very simple scene, but as you know, being a director, there's no scene that takes 30 minutes to shoot. And so Stephen comes in to shoot this. I can tell he's under the gun. I'm meeting him for the first time. He's got these
and by the way, for those of you guys watching, so Stephen S. DeKnight he went on to become the showrunner of Spartacus. He was also the showrunner of the first season of Daredevil, and he just directed Pacific Rim Uprising as well. So this is the guy that she's dealing with.
Yes. And so, and I don't know who he is. I don't know. I just know that he's a bald guy with tattoos. Right. But I realized very quickly that I am the only person in the scene who has ever been on a set before. Everyone else, it's their very first acting job. So Stephen is trying to like give this really quick direction and all these actors are like, what's going on? And I go, okay, so you want me to do this? And you go here and you go here and you go here. And he was like, Yes, Erin Cummings. Love that. So boom, boom, boom. We get the thing done. We're good. And then I think that we became friends on MySpace or Friendster or whatever it was at the time.
You're dating us both.
Yeah, exactly. And so, what do you mean? I'm 29 years old. And so then I got called to do a third episode of Dollhouse, and I just reached out to Steven and I said, hey, I don't know if you're on the lot. I'm here shooting. It'd be great to say hi. So he comes by, we're hanging out between scenes, and I said, are you going to do another episode? Hoping that he would maybe bring back attendant number 1. And he said, no, I actually got an offer I couldn't refuse, so I'm moving on. And I'm like, oh, great. No, I'm not going to get to play attendant number 1 again. Well, what are you doing? He goes, oh, it's this show called Spartacus, and we're shooting in New Zealand, and this is the da-da-da-da. And I said, oh my gosh, you should meet Rick Jacobson. Because I had just worked with him on Spartacus, and I knew that I just worked with him on Bitch Slap. Thank you. But I knew that Rick had directed more episodes of Xena and Hercules than any other director. So he had extensive knowledge of the terrain. And he had also worked with Rob Tapper before on Xena and Hercules. Right. So Steven and I continued to develop our friendship. And it was, purely platonic. He was really lovely. He was always professional. Same thing here. And I reached out to him and wrote him this letter. I basically pitched Rick to him and said, these are all the reasons why you need to hire Rick Jacobson to direct your pilot. Now, I'm not saying that I got Rick the job. I don't want to say that. Calm down, everyone. But, because Rob Tapper was like, oh, Rick is really great. I want to hire him. But Steven did say that having that, from my perspective as an actor, having just worked with him, it definitely, I think, put him in his mind in a different way than maybe had he looked on Rick's resume and wanted to stray away from the Hercules and Xena world. I said, listen, you need somebody that has the experience with green screen that Rick does. I sent him clips from Bitch Slap and all this stuff. And I never was thinking for an instant that I would be part of Spartacus. It was in New Zealand. What was I going to do? So then Steven called me one day and he said, we have these guys that we're looking at for Spartacus, and it's down to a couple guys, and we've seen them be tough. We haven't seen them be romantic. Would you be willing to come in and read off camera with some of the guys? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll come and be a reader. So we go in, and I'm standing behind the camera, and Andy was the first person to come in.
Andy
Whitfield,
who went on to
become Spartacus. So he's over there, and I'm way over here, and I'm standing beside the casting director behind the camera, and we're trying to do this Surah and Spartacus scene, and you just can't do that from across the room with someone. And so I said to the casting director, okay, turn the camera off. And she looked at me like, who the fuck are you? And she was, excuse me? I said, turn the camera off. And Steven's sitting in his chair, and he's just like, fucking Erin Cummings, here she goes. So I walked up to Andy, and I said, I am here for you. I am here for you to get this job. And I want you to get this job. I know we just met, but I want you to get this job. I didn't even know. I just said that. I said, so we're going to do the scene, just me and you. Camera's not going to turn on, just me and you. We're going to do the scene. Whatever you need to do. If you need to hold my hand, if you need to hug me, if you need to kiss me, whatever you need to do to make me the woman that is going to get you there, make me that woman right now. We do the scene, and it was like electric. I mean, like the room was vibrating in this way that when you're just really everything is going the way it should. Like all of every molecule in the room was on fire. When you know that things are progressing as they should. And so I said, okay. And then we did it, I think, one more time with me and him together. And then we did it again with me behind the camera. But we had established that connection. Right. And I think that's so important that, when you're working with someone in a scene, yeah, maybe you're not going to, I don't even think that we kissed, but there was a connection. Like we held hands. We felt the electricity run from one person to the next and back and forth and back and forth. And as actors, we were breathing the same breath together and we got into sync. And the next actor who came in, I did the same thing for him. I'm not saying that it was like, but I didn't feel the same thing with him. Like I gave him permission to use me as a vessel for his audition. And I told him this is a safe place to do this. Like I'm okay with this. Here are my parameters. Don't go crazy, but here's where we can do this in a safe way. And I just didn't feel the same thing. And then afterwards, Steven said, well, obviously there's a lot of opinions that are going to go into this decision, but just from your perspective, what did you think? And I said, I thought they both did a wonderful job, but I will tell you, whoever you get to play Sura is going to need to be with a Spartacus that makes her feel the way that Andy Whitfield made me feel. Cut to, Steven said, by the way, I thought you did a really good job working, in the role of Sura. And when we come around to that role, we're going to bring you in. And I said, great, that's fantastic. Well, cut to, we're not auditioning that role in America. We're only going to audition that role in New Zealand and Australia. And so I was like, oh, that's a bummer, but it is what it is. Life goes on. But then he said, people keep watching your tape and they keep seeing you and Andy together. And I think I just kind of became the thing that everyone else was compared to. And he said, we just keep finding people that either have the talent, but they don't have this other thing that we're looking for. They have that, they don't have and they just, for whatever reason, they couldn't find the thing. But you know how it also goes. There's budgetary issues. There's, and I know that Sura was never really supposed to be that big of a deal. Not in Steven's mind. Steven always knew from the beginning that the relationship between Spartacus and Sura was the linchpin of the show. It was the love that they had that propelled him and was the root behind every major decision that he made. And that if that didn't work, then the show didn't
If you
work.
don't feel that, when you understand the show, if you've seen the show, everything is predicated on Spartacus's desire to get back to Sura.
Right.
And if you don't buy into that, as an audience member, if you do not buy into that, this man would move heaven and hell to be with this woman, then nothing else about the show works. His entire time, as a gladiator, all that, none of it makes sense unless you buy into that one specific thing. And that becomes the spark that fuels everything else for the audience.
Right. So then so months go by. And at this point, I have now become a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over Sura. I'm like, this is my job. I have to play this role. It's kind of like, I think of auditioning like dating. You go on a first date with someone and you're like, yeah, that was good. We'll see where it goes. But by like the 7th date, you're planning the wedding. You're like, what are we doing here? Like, what's going on? Because I'm ready to just like lock this down and I love you. And you go a little crazy because you've invested yourself with this person. And auditioning is the same way. By the time you're testing for the role, you are so obsessed with the idea of, you're winning your Emmy and you're walking the red carpet and you're on the set and you're in your, like you're in it. I saw myself in New Zealand. I like the whole thing. And meanwhile, at this point, Andy's been hired and he's training, and Rick has been hired and he's doing, all the shot lists and everything. And I'm like, hey, motherfuckers, remember me? Hey, I still don't have a job and I would really like to be a part of this. Remember me, guys? So eventually it comes back around. And I know, and Steven's like, listen, he goes, I would give anything for somebody in Australia or New Zealand to be the person, because I just want to get this role cast at this point. He goes, but when we can find someone that's as good or better than you, we'll hire them. But we haven't found that person yet. So thankfully they didn't. And then they made me an offer that was bullshit. But I said, you know what? I have a feeling is going to be a life-changing role. And even though it is not ideal in all the ways that I would want a deal to be, it was something that I knew it was going to be special. I knew that. And against the advice of people supposedly wiser than me, I went to New Zealand and I did it. And I was right.
We're going to skip ahead a little bit here. But Spartacus becomes incredibly successful. Then it gets announced Andy gets his diagnosis. Mm-hmm. Andy gets sick. They proceed with the show without him.
So this is after he gets sick the second time?
No, the first time. So
they do the prequel.
Yeah, so they do the prequel.
Right.
And it was that year that I threw one of my first parties at Comic-Con that year. We partnered with Stars, and we made the theme of the Masters of the Web party that year, a Spartacus theme. Stars sent all these people dressed as gladiators and as, I don't know what the name of the women were at the time, but it was all covered, and Andy was there.
Andy was there with Jai.
Andy was there with Jai, and he was, first of all, he looked great. Mm-hmm. He was just a joy at the party. He talked to my wife, my aunt. He took a bunch of pictures with my wife and some friends of mine, and he was just great. And the word going around the party was, Andy's coming back. Mm-hmm. And that's what everybody was all excited about. Andy's coming back. This is going to be great. And I remember it was just a few months later that I opened my news feed and Andy had passed away. And I remember, just that shock you get whenever you hear that about anybody and thinking, I just saw them and they looked or sounded great. You obviously had a very special connection with Andy and working with him that one year. And I don't want to put you on the spot terribly, but and I know you and I talked about it a long time ago, but when you heard about it, did you know that it was coming at that point? Or were you like me in the same boat as me? It's like, we thought he was on the road to recovery. How did you hear? What was your reaction when you heard that? I mean, it must have just been incredibly difficult.
So I saw Andy right after Comic-Con because I didn't go to Comic-Con that year.
I remember because he'd emailed you about it. You're going to come to our party and you weren't going to be there that year.
I wasn't going to be there. I don't remember why, but I wasn't there. But I saw Andy when he came to LA right after Comic-Con. We had dinner and I remember it's so ironic looking back on it. I said to him, because he looked great. He looked so healthy. And I said, wow, if this is what cancer looks like, sign me up. Oops. And yeah, and that was the last time I saw him. But I remember when I heard that the cancer had come back and that he was going to have to step away and that they were recasting. It was just sort of, I now realize that I was one of those people who said all those stupid things to people with cancer that you shouldn't say, like, you're going to beat this and you're the strongest person I know. And if anybody can beat this, you've got this. And it was like, what the fuck did I know? I didn't know what I was talking about. I'm not his doctor. I didn't know what was going on as far as like the ins and outs and the complexity of cancer. And I remember when we were filming, he had this terrible back pain. He just had this pain in his back. I remember there was this scene where he has to carry Sura and put her on the pyre, and his back was in so much pain, and I felt so bad that he had to carry me. And I wish that I hadn't eaten lunch that day because I just felt bad that his back hurt so bad. And there were rumblings. People were saying, well, maybe he's too old or whatever. People were saying things like that. And then that was when they found out, oh, it's not that he's old. And he was going to a chiropractor and a physio, and he didn't want to get tests. He didn't believe in like x-rays and, a lot of traditional Western medicine. So he, finally, I guess it was the physical that he had to take you have to get for the projects to get insured, you have to get a physical. And I guess when he went to that physical, the doctor said, no, there's something seriously wrong. And that was when they, I guess, did an MRI or an X-ray or something, and they realized that he had a tumor wrapped around his spine. And that was the reason why he had the back pain. And when I think about just all the physical things that he went through on that first season in that much pain, and so, yeah. And then I remember I was in New York and I was shooting Pan Am, and I actually had a date with someone in New York. He was going to make me dinner, and I was in a taxi on my way to his apartment. And like right when I got in the taxi in Tribeca where I was staying, Stephen tonight called me, and he said, I just think you should know before you read it anywhere, Andy has passed away. And I remember being like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? He passed away. And he said, yeah, he knew that he was doing really bad. And Stephen had emailed me before and said, if you want to email Andy, now is the time to do it. And I didn't know what that meant.
You didn't put that together.
When he said, if you want to email Andy, you should do it now, I thought that meant, hey, like Andy could really use some encouragement right now.
Right.
I didn't know that it was. It didn't ever occur to me. It just wasn't supposed to happen. And it never occurred to me that, people get cancer all the time and then they're fine. And it just wasn't supposed to happen. And so I'm in the cab and I'm on my way to this date. And I call my mom and I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, I think you should just go. And I don't want you to be home by yourself. And so I show up at this guy's apartment.
Wow, that must have been quite an evening.
And he opens the door, and I am just sitting there, and tears are just rolling down my face. And I said, I know I should go, and I don't even know why I'm here, but I just found out that someone that I love so much has just died. And I don't know what to do right now. And he goes, okay. He said, why don't you just come in and we'll just sit down. And we just sat down and just talked about Andy. And that person is now still a very, very dear friend of mine. And yeah, I just every September 11th, I think about Andy. That was the day he died. I mean, it's such a tragic day, obviously, for most people. But for me, September 11th is, that's Andy's day.